Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where the plays aren't optimized, but they sure as heck are fun. I'm one of your hosts, Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And today we are going to talk about a tweet that we came across. We scroll through Twitter a lot, as is the usual during these times.
I admit I doom scroll all the time.
Oh my god. And one of my favorite people on Twitter right now is Shivam Bhatt. He's Girapori Gears on Twitter, member of the CAG, which I am blanking on.
Commander Advisory Committee?
Commander Advisory Group.
Yeah, sure, that makes more sense, because that would be the G part.
And he's the host of Casual Magic Podcast. Great guy. If you're ever doom scrolling, just hop over to his feed. Anyway, he tweeted the other day, "What do you think pro tournament level EDH would look like?" Now, it's a tough question. It seems like an oxymoron to some morons like us. Bruce, how did you respond to this?
I responded poorly. Basically, the way I initially thought of it was, if you create a pro tournament level EDH, then essentially what you're doing is you're trying to put all the Pro Tour trappings into a format that is essentially Commander. This just struck me as such a bad idea. One, we all already know that adding prizes and prize support to a Commander game makes it less fun. It has to, because people then start to focus on trying to win the game as opposed to trying to have as much fun as possible playing the game. I get that. A lot of people winning the game is enough. In any event, I looked at this and saw a situation where if this exists, then it's something that players will aspire to, especially players that are newer to Commander, which means they'll be looking at these deck lists that pro level would be using and will want to copy those deck lists. So one, Commander then gets way more expensive, and two, the decks that you're playing against in the wild become way more oppressive, way tougher to play against.
And as a generally budget player, I think that EDH is facing kind of a rift right now. In a generalization, there's two types of EDH players. There's the players who want to just win. There's the players who want as much fun. Now, there's obviously overlap. There's a lot of people in the first group who will say, like, oh, but winning is fun.
Right.
Which, I mean...
Simply put, you've described what I see as less two camps and more of the continuum. And I think most people land somewhere in the middle. You know, I mean, look, I'm not playing Commander with the goal that I want to lose every single game. That's not my goal.
That makes one of us.
But but I will say that, you know, I'm far more interested in seeing a fun game than I am in getting the win. I mean, we just had our game last week, and I got off to a great start. I thought I was going really well. And then John came over with a Cornelia, made a couple of great plays, and took me out in one turn. And then John did not even win that game. And to be quite honest, I had forgotten who had won the game.
Yeah.
Because I remembered the play. I remembered John's big play with a Cornelia, because that's what I'm going to remember out of that game, not who won. So that's sort of where my driver sits. And I think a pro level takes that away. And this is not, just to be clear, this is not a slam on CEDH players. Yeah,
it's hardly even a slam on people who are trying to play the game to win.
For me, at least, when I was talking about, when I considered how pro level would work, I wasn't thinking about a group of CEDH decks pounding away at each other, because I think there's a time and a place for that. Again, I don't want that to be the aspirant level for the new player, is to look at premier decks and say that's what I should be going for. But honestly, pro level decks are not going to be what the current CEDH decks are. A pro level deck will find ways so that they goldfish wins on turn 2 with some level of consistency. I have no idea how to make that happen, but I do know that this will happen. We've seen it in Pro Tour Legacy decks, where players who are dedicated Legacy players, for the most part, barely hold their own against players who are Pro Tour level, either playing those same decks or finding a deck that's just simply far better than what was initially seen. So, like I said, I'm not slamming EDH players. I'm just saying that having a format where we create a level where we want to see players aspire to that high level of Commander play with these amazing decks is not where Commander should be going. I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, it fundamentally changes the goal of the game from playing the game to winning the game.
Right. I really believe that Commander has always been and should always be about maximizing the level of fun amongst the players themselves, which means that if I'm going to bring out a deck that's going to give me 100% fun, but it's going to make everybody else miserable, then I shouldn't be playing that deck. I want to play decks where everybody is going to have a good time. In any event, that's where I was headed. But rather than look at I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about how bad a Pro Tour level setup would be. What I want to talk about is, well, let's go the other route. Rather than create something where you've got Pro Tournament level EDH, why not create something that features a high level of fun and excitement about Commander? The whole point of doing a feature or a series is to sell the cards. So we want to sell Commander. The best way to sell Commander is to sell what Commander is. It's a group of people having a really good time. And you combine that with fun people and fun decks. So my sort of response to that is, or at least my tweet was, the format should look at creating a streamed league full of fun personalities, showing off insane and wild decks, creating memorable moments with no one tracking wins. So no points, no winner. Obviously the game ends when someone wins, but we're not concerned with the win. So I sort of wanted to talk about this. I wanted Andy and I to sort of throw it back and forth and see what we thought this would look like. How does this go? Right off the bat, there's a couple things I don't really want to talk about because to me, these are things that can really get us bogged down to the point where we wouldn't actually get to talk about any of the fun stuff. I don't want to talk about how we decide who should be on this series or how we decide to replace people and put new people in. Because if you're going to do a series, you can't just have the same group of people there week after week after week after week after week. Then you might as well just choose the guys from Loading Ready Run and say, run a Commander game every week. I want a little more variety.
I mean, they kind of do that too.
And don't get me wrong, they're great. They're great.
Yeah.
And honestly, there are probably people with LRR that I would love to see on this.
So the base concept here is have correct me if I'm wrong with your idea, have a Wizards sponsored weekly or so video or stream where it's essentially game nights level production with high profile or low profile, some sort of personality in the community that will continue to rotate in and out in some sort of 16-person, 4-person pod. And
roughly, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about. You can argue the numbers. You can say maybe 20, maybe 12, maybe whatever.
Right.
But roughly speaking, I think you can easily choose 16 people out of the community who would be a blast to watch play. And if you're only looking at one game a week, and that's what I'm looking at. I want it to be one game a week. I want it to be, same time, same place every week. I'm not looking at it being live because I like the idea of the quality. I like the idea of all the rest of it that can go into it. And realistically, you can have it set up so that these 4 players played the game a month earlier, 2 months earlier. Either way, that's what I'm looking for. So I guess my main question here, like I said, let's forget about how they stay on and how we add new people and all this kind of thing, because that's not relevant. What kind of a style are we looking at? I mean, obviously we've already referenced game nights.
Right.
I mean, this is the elephant in the room. They're already doing something like this. They do it on a once a month basis. It's almost always Josh and Jimmy and 2 other people. And I love this. However, I want to see a bigger cast. I want to see more rotation. If you do it weekly, you're going to see a much deeper pool of decks.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing it once a month. We're looking at 4 times as much, so 4 times as many decks. There could be all kinds of requirements. I would initially say that everybody can only play a deck once. But anyways, so there's the game night style, and I think most of us are recognize what I'm talking about here with the gameplay, and then occasionally you have the sit down on the side where they talk about why they made the play or something that happened or something along that lines. Then there's the Commander Versus style.
Yeah.
And I like this. It's much more live with less editing. I know it's not live, but...
Well, I think it's live now. Or maybe not now, but...
Right.
I know they switched over to streaming it live and then doing minor editing for the YouTube.
Right.
But,
so there's that. To me, the real player with Commander Versus is the idea that there's always there are points going on in the background.
Right.
So every game you get points by doing certain things. I don't know that I necessarily want that in the series.
And honestly, I don't think I've ever gone into a Commander Versus episode being like, okay, this person's in first with these amount of points. Like, I mean, they do the recap at the beginning, but like, I don't think I've ever cared. There are people out there who do, but I think with this format, it does that perfectly. Where it does, I watch for the human to human interaction of Jeremy to Steven or whatever,
right?
And it's their table talk rather than the efficient play. Or
I like
the points.
I like that it brings another level to the game.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm not sure if you would have to be very careful with how you set up the points.
Yeah.
So that the game stops being about crazy insane plays and starts being about how do you structure the points, because as soon as you put point values on things, then your focus is shifting even more towards winning that thing, even if there's no prize at the end.
With Commander Versus, I think the points specifically work because it is the same 4 people each week.
Right.
It feels like the points are there because they knew from the start that if we do this week after week, we are going to get somewhat bored of the format where we need that extra step of competition, or at least like to set us apart from the rest.
Right. Like, I mean, one of the things that we used to do way back when I played with another group, 3 groups, 4 groups ago, was for at the start of the night, everybody who's there antes a pack of cards. So you brought a pack of Magic cards with you, and you anteed it up. So you threw it in the middle, and the winner of the game would get one of the packs.
That already makes me feel so
uncomfortable. You could pull the pack out, and generally speaking, we all cracked it right there because you weren't going to hold on to it. But for us, for that particular group, a single pack of cards was essentially of no value at all.
Right.
Okay, so, we each ponied up $3 and we're playing Magic for the entire night. It was very much a case of who cares?
Yeah.
It just wasn't relevant. And every once in a while somebody pulls a really cool card, but for the most part, nobody cared. If you still had the option to go for the big play or not, you did it. It brought a second level. And that's sort of what I'd love to see, but it's really tough to have that kind of balance where you can get that extra level, but at the same time, it just doesn't carry the meaning. So
yeah, I think having any sort of prize support is bad, or at least for this idea. It would need to be framed in more of like the idea of like a TV show where these people are essentially actors. They're using their personality and their words to be entertaining more than the gameplay. The gameplay is there to facilitate the conversation, to facilitate the forward momentum of the program. But generally, they are being paid for, if this was sponsored by Wizards, they would be being paid for their time rather than who wins.
Yeah.
So it's generally even across the board. Nobody is being paid to win. They're there because they are personalities.
Right. And the other sort of option that I sort of wanted to throw into the ring here is Pro Tour style layout. Right. So when I say this, I mean we've got commentators and we've got you can have a main desk. The idea is that the commentary is something that could be overlaid on top of the game after the game. So you can have each person sitting on the couch in the hot seat talking about why they made various plays. You've got the commentators who will have already seen the game, and then they can commentate on the game as it goes along, with the idea being, that you can add a level of tension to the game. I also like the idea of, when you watch any of the Pro Tour coverage, there's always somebody there to go over the deck list. Well, you can certainly do that here as well. I will say right off the bat, I'm not particularly sold on the idea of a commentary for a Commander game. I don't know that it's ever been done. I think if you're going to get people in there to sell the game by showing off the personalities and all this, I don't think you want the commentary over it. You want to hear what these people are saying. You want to hear the interactions and hear the fun they're having.
Absolutely.
I don't think I need a commentator to tell me how much fun they're having. This isn't completely about the decks. And I think the people in the group can probably tell you when somebody's down to their last out, they know it. The table knows it. So they're just sort of like, yeah, and then see what happens. So I don't know that you need the commentary, but I do like the idea of, a discussion afterwards. Like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And it can either be with the players themselves, all just sort of, hanging out on a couch after the game, discussing the game, or maybe you bring somebody in. You can bring in like the host of the series who can do the interviews afterwards and just sort of have a discussion. Or have somebody come in and, Andy, we saw this great, you made this great play in this game. We want to go through, let's talk about your deck and see how is it that these two pieces work in your deck? And then, have a discussion back and forth between person questioning and you as far as why the deck performed that way or how that came about. Was that the goal of the deck, or was it just a lucky happenstance where two cards just worked out the right way at the right time kind of thing? So
right. And I think with that there's this level of like not getting ahead of the comments, but I mean with anything you've got people on both sides being like, you did good or you did bad, and I think it's funny because people always compare Magic to either poker or chess, two things that are somewhat nichely still televised.
Right.
And I think if you go with the poker comparison, you've got the Pro Tour or, Players Tour or whatever it's called now, which is, professional Magic. And if this were a format, if this casual EDH broadcast was a format, I could see it being more closely resembling like when Bravo had the celebrity poker tournaments, where it's like you're playing and there is a goal to win, but like it is more about getting these celebrities in a room and having them play a game. It's a game, so there's the goal to win, but it is not the goal of the idea. And with that, you also have, like, the talking heads. You've got the people on the couch. You've got, like, oh, what did you think of this when this happened? And it would also then bring into the equation, as a viewer, do you have complete information? Do you know what's in everybody's hand at any point in time? Or is it what is on the board? And I think with something like this, you wouldn't necessarily need to know what's in everybody's hands. I think there's those plays in every game where you have that decision to make the most powerful play or the most optimized play or whatever. And sometimes you don't necessarily want to take those. So I think giving that to the audience, it doesn't necessarily lead to better coverage.
Right. So I guess the other tie-in then is, given what we're looking for, can this even happen? Is this something that can happen? Could you produce game nights once a week? Yes.
Absolutely. Given
enough money and enough people, you can produce game nights as frequently as you want. You just have to throw enough money at it to make it happen.
So the real question is, can Hasbro fund something like this? And the answer is yes. And I think it comes with a lot of balance issues where it's like they want people to watch, so they want the stakes higher. But something that has been always thrown around with, like, even a Wizard sponsored event like the pre-releases. The unofficial tagline is always the stakes have never been lower, because I mean that's
until now.
Right. And so like with this idea, I think that would need to be transferred over. Things aren't going to happen to the best of everyone's ability. Things aren't going to be, if you're not going to want the 16 top most optimized decks in this league, because it's not about that. And I think what is advantageous for Wizards is the fact that they are the ones that make the cards, so they can dictate when things happen.
Right.
And
well,
I think,
I mean, at least part of this is the idea is, I mean, you would make that clear at the start.
right.
You know, there is definitely an allure for somebody who is getting on this stage for the first time. They don't want to look like a chump. They don't
Right.
want to be the one who brings that lousy deck that just can't compete and get blown out. Nobody wants to be that guy. You know that everybody is going to bring something that is, at the very least, optimized for that level. Just because you brought Thallid Tribal, it is going to be the best Thallid Tribal that anybody has ever seen.
Yeah.
Because you're going to brag about every single card that hits the table. You're going to be like, bam, there's my basic forest. Check it out. Looks like I got a bunch of Thalids hanging down from this tree. Or, you know, and it'll just go on and on. And look, optimizing Thalids is one thing. Optimizing another something else can prove to be fatal. But you do want to have people in there who understand what you're gunning for. There has to be an understanding that this was the game that was supposed to be played for this week. It turns out the game was lousy. We're going to play another game. So Shuffle up. Here we go.
I think that was one of my favorite things about the early episodes of Game Nights, is that they did multiple games in an episode. Like if a game went too fast, that they just kind of like cut to the end and then started a new one. And the great thing with this is that it's a double-edged sword, where because they are coming from the source, they have access to the next set, which, I mean, is just like Game Nights. Game Nights has early access to these cards, so they can get the episode out on time, so that they can hype up the audience to the next set.
Right. So
you could have these special episodes every however as each set comes out. But the issue there comes with, then you're kind of taking away that exclusivity of those smaller creators, which I think is like huge. I think a lot of the Magic community, especially the EDH and Commander community, relies on those smaller creators. You've got, you know, all these different, even just beyond Commander.
Yeah, between your the small scale streamers, the Twitter personalities who, you know, who get a card because it happens to fit with whatever their personal set is or whatever. No, my push here was the idea that, can Wizards make this happen, with all of us knowing that this is essentially an advertisement. You know, it's one thing to put together okay, so this week we're going to run with all of the Ikoria Commander decks. And then, you know, when the next big set comes out and we get 4 more Commander decks, we're going to run with that. And when Commander Legends comes out, we're going to say, okay, well, you know, we're going to try a draft. We're going to do a 4-player draft. We're going to draft it the way we sort of anticipated it would go and see how that goes. But at what point does Wizards being in charge of this scenario mean that the push is going to be for the new cards? That the push is going to be to advertise product? I mean, does this become overwhelming to the point where you essentially have 16 people just shilling a product? And, you know, they've all got permanent grins on their faces and they all just like, yes, we love the product. Yay, go Wizards.
Right.
We love Commander. We love Commander. At some point, you start to recognize this is just, it's just not sincere. They're not genuinely happy or excited about what's going on. And they're just, you know, pumping the product.
So between those two ideas, between taking it away from the community, which this is a community-driven format, no matter what people say, and taking it upon themselves to just be advertising, I think it comes down to this thing that has been kind of going around the community for the past couple of weeks, where with the release of the Walking Dead Secret Lair, which I don't want to get into right now, if ever, it has brought to the forefront this idea that Commander is being slowly ripped away from the community that created it, that continues to make it thrive, and is just a product of Wizards, which to an extent is exactly what it is. I think with the release after release after release of Commander products, specifically Commander products, it's a format that is being formed and molded by Wizards because they know it is the biggest format by player base. And you've got the things like the Secret Lair, which are keeping eternal formats in mind. And you've got Backlash, and this could just as easily be the same thing, where you've got people who are like, this is bogus because it's just this, and then you've got people who realize like, oh, like if this is something that Wizards is just doing to promote Commander and Commander product, they're slowly just getting their grip into even just the rules committee.
Right. If you're doing this on a weekly basis and Wizards is the one footing the bill, you can't tell me for even 1 second that as soon as The Walking Dead gets released, that 3 days later you don't see the next round of this particular series featuring 4 legends from that series. That you don't see those, if not as commanders, then definitely at least as part of the 99, most likely as commanders. And that's going to happen every single time, because as long as Wizards is going to put out that kind of money, they're going to expect that kind of response back. So they would just do that every single time. I mean, Commander Legends is coming out. It wouldn't take more than a split second for them to say, okay, so there's 71 legends in this set. So I don't want to see a Commander deck that doesn't feature one of those 71 legends every week for the next 4 weeks. I mean, that's not that hard. And I wouldn't even consider that to be too unreasonable either. It's just, how much control do you want to give to Wizards on this kind of thing?
I mean, I think that's exactly what's going on with game nights. I think that's exactly what's going on with Loading Ready Runs pre-releases. I think they are essentially funding these things, and they are essentially advertisements, and not even to say that is a bad thing. I think it is giving us the content that we want. It is giving a bit of creative control to these creators, which is great. It is giving them a livelihood. I get really frustrated when people are like, oh, this thing is just a cash grab by Hasbro, or this is a thing that Wizards is doing just for more money. And it's like, yeah, it's a product. It's a game that you are buying into. And I think that the idea that this format, this tour, essentially, being just an advertisement, is both good and bad. I think it creates a customer base to like make the product thrive, to make the format thrive of Commander. But it is also like, you have to be aware that is exactly what's happening.
Right. And there's a part of me that says, okay, so then take Wizards out of the equation. But I don't know that there's necessarily enough advertising revenue to be able to produce something at the quality that we're talking about on a weekly basis. I just don't know that there's enough advertising out there for that. I mean, I look at game nights. They've added ads. They've added their advertisements in the middle of the program, and they were already sponsored. So they've got their sponsorship and they've got the advertising, and they have to do this to make it work. And I get that, and I'm supportive of that. But how do you can you turn that into something where we're looking at a weekly event? And I just don't know, because on top of what we're already saying, because I mean, realistically, Game Nights is looking at paying a wage to a handful of people, and the series that I'm talking about would be paying the wage.
Set the alarm for when?
I wasn't talking to you, Siri. You hush for a minute. It would be greater by magnitude. You'd need that many more people and that much more we're not talking about just the 4 people playing the Commander game. You're talking about 16 people playing, and you've got to provide them with some reason to play. So there's going to be some dollars there.
Right.
And then you've got all of these people in the background producing it. And
right.
if you take Wizards out of the equation, I just don't know that there's enough money there to be able to do it in such a way so that it doesn't feel like you're shilling a product. And even without Wizards in the mix, then you're just shilling something else. And,
right.
Where is it okay to be, is it somehow better that you've now created a series that is selling deodorant versus a series that's selling Magic cards because Wizards is sponsoring it? Well, wouldn't it make more sense to let Wizards sponsor it? I guess there's a balance there, and I don't know if Wizards can walk that line.
I think I don't mind when it seems like, creators are quote unquote shilling to promote Wizards products. They are a fan, especially YouTube. You've got people who are using either Wizards products or Wizards money to do their own thing. With something like this, if you take out all Wizard money and it's just fully self-funded, whether through other promotional pieces or through like a Patreon, you are losing a bit of legitimacy. There's this idea where Wizards gives out preview cards, say, or they fund certain streams or certain creators because they believe in those products, or they believe in those streamers, they believe in those people, they believe in the products that they're putting out there. So with that comes this self-believed legitimacy of like, oh my god, like I got a preview card from Wizards, so I must have, to an extent, quote unquote, made it. Like I made it. I am legitimate to an extent because I have this, which is brilliant, honestly, on Wizards' part, that they can have that control over a creator's legitimacy. But if you take out all Wizard funding from a product like this quote-unquote pro EDH or casual broadcast league, you end up losing some sort of legitimacy, but you can stand on your own morals of I'm doing this for the game rather than for the company. So it's this weird two-edged backwards thing.
And speaking of your own morals and shilling for another company, I'd like to take this moment to thank our sponsor for tonight's episode. For tonight's episode, our sponsor is Goblin Game. Goblin Game, a 7-mana sorcery in red, of course, because where else would it be, where I can now take the chance at losing half my life. Goblin Game. Everybody loves a good Goblin Game. Andy, back to you.
I think this whole thing kind of rides a very fine line between, you've got the first point of how do you make something where people are competing not be competitive. It's a game, and I think it kind of comes down to the very essence of EDH, where of course you want to win the game, but you also are striving for people to have as much fun, to have an experience rather than have the end result, which between you and me, I've forgotten how many games I've won, because not through a sheer number, because we all know I don't win most games, but mostly because I don't think of that as my game being done. Like I'm not, it's not the goal of my game to win, so I never remember if I won or not.
So Andy, just to be clear, I track all kinds of stuff. I track the number of articles I wrote. I track the number of words that I've produced in articles. I organize all of my cards, not just the rares, all of them, even the jank, the garbage, the stuff that should be tossed in the fire. It's all organized. It's by color coded, all this, on and on and on. I don't keep track of my wins. Because why? Why would you do that? That's just, there is no rhyme nor reason to keeping track of that kind of a thing. A win doesn't mean that you played a particularly great game. I would say most of my wins come on the back of a game where I just had a bad start and everybody left me alone. And then I built up at the end and blasted into a win. And, great for me. But
to use that example from earlier, I was the one who ended up winning that game, and I was so far behind every single turn of that game. The one with where A. Cornelia beat you, and then there was just nothing left of John's life total that I just kind of came in and stole it.
Right.
I remember winning because it was just so absurd. But when I'm thinking back on decks on how to improve or whatever, I don't think of my win rate. I think of what did I want to do with it and how can I make sure that happens.
Right.
I think of how many times I missed land drops or whatever.
Right. So I guess in a way this is sort of a long-winded way of us both saying that running a series that would do this is far more difficult than running a series where you're simply choosing the best decks and the best players and having them bash their heads against each other to see who is the best. Because in those situations, they're not looking for a balance. They're looking for a win. They're looking for a final single person left standing. And we're not looking for that. We're looking for an entertainment. This is not a televised sport. This is a televised comedy.
Right. This is like the variety hour type thing. Like it's acts. It's the people that you came to see rather than the game.
Right.
It's so tough because it's just like, it is a game with rules. Yes. We want to make sure that those rules are followed. Yes. But there's no consequence. Like it's these people would be paid for their time rather than if they won a game.
Right.
And it's so hard because you want the Wizards' approval. You want to be able to have that funding to make it happen, whether it's their own doing or through a third-party funding.
Right.
But you also don't want to have Wizards have their hand in the pie of like, we also get to control the rules now. And I think that would be a slippery slope. We have seen this before of like, how much does Wizards affect the rules of a fan-made community, of a fan-made, what's the word? Format. Yeah. I've said this word 100 times.
So, Andy, to just sort of to bring this to an end and wrap it up.
Yeah.
Can this happen? And should this happen?
I think as a very specific scenario that we've set up, I don't think it can happen. I think it is already happening. The community has created somewhat of a generalized idea of what it means to play Magic on a regular basis, what it means to have this spectator sport of Commander. Throughout this pandemic, we've gotten people like Olivia Gobert-Hicks, we've got people like Jeremy Knoll, we've got people like Ben Wheeler, who host these weekly streams of Magic, generally centered around Commander and generally centered around these cast of characters. That is low stakes to no stakes. People don't keep track of the wins. People are hanging out. They're having a drink. They're eating chips. They're talking to chat. Obviously, with this example that we've been talking about, there isn't really much of a chat to interact with, but that is their format of Twitch, their platform. And so like it's a murky question of like, can it happen? I think in the strictest sense, no, because to have Wizards be so involved takes the spirit of Commander and kind of like throws it to the wind. Having a non-competitive format that is broadcast on a semi-regular basis, I hope continues past the whole pandemic.
Right.
But I think having like a well-defined, regulated stream broadcast, whatever you want to call it, it's tough to define it, I guess.
Right.
I don't know.
The way I see it, very, very briefly. So
Yeah.
can it happen? Yes, I definitely think it can happen. I think Wizards recognizes how much money Commander brings in, and quite honestly, putting the kind of effort into creating a weekly program with a rotating cast of characters is just not asking too much. I think that Wizards absolutely can do this. Should they? I would say that Wizards should, with the caveat that I would want it to be a predetermined length of time. So you choose your 16 people, maybe you have it preset for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 8 weeks, however long, pick your length. And when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And it just sort of needs to wash from there. Because I can see this, I think over the long term, I think that's when you start seeing people get jaded. I think that's when Wizards starts looking at other things to spice it up, to make the change, to do this, that, or the other. I think if you've got a predetermined length, so you know that, for the next, that you've got 8 episodes worth of material and information. Wizards can look at those 8 shows and say, we want to see this, or this in one program, and this in the next, and this in the next. And you can have all that set up, and then when it's done, it's done. So that way it also limits the amount of money that Wizards is putting into it, and everybody understands that this is going to come to an end. And then at that point, when you create the void, there's a good chance that somebody else will try and step in, at least to some extent. Or at least you'll have created an audience which then searches elsewhere, which searches for the smaller streamer, which searches for the group that streams on Commander, that will pump up the Commander Versus and the game nights and the other options. So that's what I would love to see now. Again, hope springs eternal.
Yeah, I like the idea of a limited run. I think that definitely ups the is it able to be done factor. I think it would benefit, if anything, from being limited, i.e. Celebrity Jeopardy or something, where it's like it's limited and it's never too high of stakes, and people are competing for not their own benefit.
Right, and it means Wizards can set a budget. It means Wizards can set the dates around the next Commander set that comes out, or they can do it around Commander Legends or something along that line as a way to sort of sell that product, but at the same time without getting overwhelming with it. But in any event, Andy, this was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been so good. Well, that's going to do it for us. I'm Andy. You can find me on Twitter, on Twitch, both at Andy Weekend.
I'm Bruce. You can try and find me on Twitch, but you won't. You are much better off going to Twitter. I am at ManaBurned on Twitter.
We're the Temple of the False Pod, where the plays aren't optimized, but they sure as heck are fun. Thank you for hanging out. We'll see you next time. Have a great night.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Andy here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Temple of the False Pod. Just a few housekeeping things here at the end of the show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe and give us a review. It really helps out the show. And it'll show us what you like about our podcast. Also, we've got a Twitter and an Instagram. Our handle is FalsePodMTG, all one word. So be sure to follow us. Feel free to reach out to us there or drop us an email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com and tell us your favorite magic-related story. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again to you and to Bruce. He's ManaBurned on Twitter, and I'm Andy Weekend on Twitter and Twitch. We're Temple of the False Pod, where our decks aren't optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Have a great night, and may your 5th land be the Temple.